2 May 2023. In the state of Utah, USA, a woman appeared on television programs, tears in her eyes, speaking about her husband who had recently passed away. She wrote a book for her 3 sons, saying their father was still watching over them from heaven. Thousands of viewers were moved. Thousands of parents bought her book. But just weeks after she appeared on television to speak about her love for her late husband, police discovered his body contained enough fentanyl to take 5 lives at once. And the woman all of America had shed tears for was the last person to hand him a cocktail that night. This is the story of Kouri Richins, America's most perfect widow. The deeper investigators dug, the more they uncovered an entirely different world behind that image. Millions of dollars in debt, secret life insurance policies, signed just months before her husband's death, an affair no one had ever known about, suspicious search history on her phone, about lethal doses, about how a death would be recorded on paperwork, and about prisons reserved for the wealthy, and a handwritten letter from her jail cell instructing someone else to tell an entirely different story. This is not just the most perfect lie the public ever believed. This is a story about how far someone planned ahead, so that no one, not even her own children, could ever see through the truth. Before we begin, thank you for spending this time with Crime Australia HT today. Whether you're watching this after a long day at work, winding down in the evening, or on a weekend, we hope you and your family are healthy, safe, and enjoying plenty of meaningful moments with your loved ones. If this is your first time here, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy real investigative stories, researched and told in detail, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next stories. And remember to subscribe to support us and give us the motivation to keep making even better content. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's go back in time to the state of Utah, USA, where, behind the image of a grieving widow, a mother who wrote a book about loss and healing, investigators were quietly uncovering an entirely different set of secrets. And it's from here that Kouri Richins' story officially begins. In 2022, the Richins family was living in an area near Park City, in the state of Utah, USA. This is an area known for its quiet neighborhoods, high-value homes, and an affluent community. Eric Richins was a local businessman. Many who knew him described him as hard-working and someone who spent a great deal of time with his family. Meanwhile, his wife, Kouri Richins, worked in real estate. She was involved in buying, renovating, and investing in properties across Utah. Those who knew the Richins family described them as a successful and very happy couple. The two had built a family life together over many years and were raising 3 children. From the outside, their life didn't seem all that different from other families in the community. A husband, a wife, 3 children, and what seemed like a bright future ahead of them. But behind the image of that stable family, there were issues many families still struggle with. But how one acts on instinct, and how strong one's ability to control that instinct actually is, can be 2 very different things. During this period, life for the Richins family continued as usual in the eyes of those around them. Eric focused on his business. Meanwhile, Kouri continued pursuing her property projects and personal investment plans. From the outside, everything seemed stable. But in reality, married life isn't always what it appears to others. According to information later revealed in court, both of them were facing various pressures in their lives: unstable work, financial difficulties, and pressure within the family, and decisions relating to their future. These are struggles many other couples have also gone through. However, the way each person handles that pressure isn't always the same. Some choose to talk it through, others choose silence, and some begin making decisions they themselves can never take back later. Eric Richins in particular was about to go through a pain he would carry with him forever. 14 February 2022. While many couples were spending time together on Valentine's Day, the Richins family also had what seemed like an ordinary day. According to information later made public in court, Eric Richins ate a sandwich his wife had prepared for him. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but a short time later, Eric's condition began to change noticeably. He began showing fairly serious symptoms. His body reacted violently. Eric reportedly broke out in hives and showed signs that made him fear he was experiencing a dangerous health issue. And he tried to save himself. Eric used his son's EpiPen and took Benadryl. Not long after, he lost consciousness. Fortunately for Eric, he pulled through the crisis after taking the medication. It was treated as an unexpected medical incident. A concerning episode, but one that had passed. Eric went on with his daily life, without a single suspicion. Just weeks after the incident on Valentine's Day, the Richins family continued their life as usual. By March 2022, an evening that seemed just as ordinary unfolded at the family home near Park City, Utah. According to information later made public at trial, Kouri Richins prepared a cocktail for her husband. Eric drank the cocktail as soon as she handed it to him. At first, nothing gave him any reason to suspect his wife, because this was the family he had built, and he loved it more than anyone else. And it was just an ordinary evening between husband and wife. But then, everything changed quickly. The following morning, Eric Richins was found unconscious, in an extremely serious condition, and appeared to no longer be breathing. At around 3:21 a.m. on 4th March 2022, Kouri called 911 for help. Paramedics and emergency services were quickly dispatched to the scene. However, by the time they arrived, it was perhaps already too late for Eric, and every effort to save him failed. Eric Richins was confirmed to have died at the age of 39. For those who knew the Richins family, this was shocking and heartbreaking news, and the scene showed no sign of an attack or any suspicious domestic violence at all. Eric was simply found to have died right there in his own home. At that time, very few people knew that Eric Richins' death would open one of the most sensational investigations in the state of Utah in the years that followed. After Eric Richins was confirmed to have died, investigators began carrying out standard examination procedures. At first, the scene showed no clear signs of an attack. No door had been forced, and there were no signs of forced entry either. Nor was there any serious injury to Eric's body, and no weapon of any kind was found at the scene. Based on what was seen at that point, the case looked more like a sudden death from illness than a criminal matter. However, under standard investigative procedure, Eric's body still had to be sent for a forensic post-mortem to determine the exact cause of death. It was this examination that completely changed the way investigators viewed the case. Forensic experts found fentanyl in Eric's system. This is an extremely powerful synthetic opioid. Test results showed the level of fentanyl in his body was extremely high, far higher than what would typically be considered life-threatening. This discovery immediately raised a series of questions for investigators. How had Eric come into contact with fentanyl? Where had that fentanyl come from? And was this really the natural death they had initially assumed? At this point, the investigation began heading in an entirely different direction. After fentanyl was discovered in Eric Richins' system, the biggest question for investigators was no longer what had caused his death, but how that substance had entered his body. This wasn't a visible wound, not a gun, nor a knife left behind at the scene. Fentanyl is something that has to be traced back through medical records, statements, personal data, and what loved ones knew about Eric's life. Investigators began checking whether Eric had ever used illegal drugs, whether he had ever been addicted to painkillers, and whether he had ever tried to obtain opioids or heavy medication from anyone. But in her initial statements after her husband's death, Kouri Richins told police Eric had no history of illegal drug use. This detail later became a very important point, because if Eric had no history of fentanyl use, if he wasn't known to have sought out this substance, And if the scene showed no clear signs of drug use, then investigators had no choice but to look again at those closest to Eric in the final hours of his life, including the woman who had prepared him a cocktail that night, Kouri Richins. At this point, she was not yet considered guilty in the eyes of the law, but her name began appearing more and more frequently in the investigation file, not because she was the grieving widow, but because she was one of the last people with Eric before he died. After the forensic examination was complete, Eric's body was returned to the family for the funeral. For his loved ones, this was a time to try to accept the reality that Eric was gone forever. While the family prepared for the days ahead without him, the investigation into the cause of Eric's death continued. And it was the toxicology results that followed that meant investigators could not close this file as an ordinary death. As the investigation widened, investigators didn't only focus on the cause of Eric Richins' death. They began looking more closely into the lives of those closest to him, especially Kouri Richins. While reviewing financial records, investigators found Kouri's financial situation was far less stable than many had believed. Outwardly, she still appeared to be a successful property investor, a woman building a life for her family. But behind that image, debts were steadily mounting. According to information later revealed in court, Kouri was carrying debts of around $4.5 million US. That was a figure that particularly caught investigators' attention, because at the same time, they discovered another detail relating to Eric Richins. Records showed multiple life insurance policies had been taken out in Eric's name. The total value of the insurance payouts was believed to be around $2 million US. These findings weren't enough on their own to prove any criminal act, but they led investigators to a new question. As investigators continued reviewing the Richins family's financial records and assets, an important question began to emerge. If Eric Richins died, who would benefit the most from his death? During the investigation, investigators found Kouri Richins had taken out multiple life insurance policies in her husband's name. According to what was later presented in court, the total value of the insurance benefits was believed to be around $2 million US. That is not a small figure. But what caught investigators' attention even more was Kouri's awareness of the assets Eric would leave behind. Prosecutors argued Kouri believed that after her husband's death, she would gain control of assets worth more than $4 million US. However, things didn't turn out the way she expected. Documents gathered by investigators showed many of Eric's assets had been arranged in a way that wasn't entirely under Kouri's control after his death. This discovery led investigators to start viewing the case from a different angle, not just the question of where the fentanyl came from, but also whether someone had seen the enormous financial benefit behind Eric's death, and why Kouri Richins would have known her husband would die, or would die early, when Eric Richins, at only 47, had already taken out life insurance, not just one, but multiple life insurance policies she had arranged herself. That is the point investigators raised as a major question, and they paid extremely close attention to this detail, because they knew it was critically important to this case. And as they continued digging into Kouri's personal life, investigators began uncovering further relationships very few had known about before. As investigators continued reviewing Kouri Richins' personal life, they began uncovering information many of the family's loved ones had had no idea about before. According to documents they had gathered, Kouri had been in a relationship with a man named Robert Josh Grossman before Eric Richins died. This discovery immediately caught investigators' attention, because at this point, they were no longer only investigating the source of the fentanyl, they were also trying to determine whether a motive existed behind Eric Richins' death. While collecting phone and message data, investigators found numerous exchanges between Kouri and Robert Josh Grossman. According to the prosecution, these messages showed Kouri had spoken about leaving her current marriage, even referring to the prospect of starting a new life in the future. Prosecutors argued these conversations were an important part of understanding Kouri's circumstances before Eric's death. However, at that point, these messages still weren't enough to prove any criminal act. They only helped investigators better understand what was happening in Kouri's personal life. But as they continued analyzing phone data and other electronic devices, investigators began finding even more notable content. And this time, it was no longer just private conversations. While investigators were quietly gathering evidence, Kouri Richins' life outwardly appeared to continue as normal. Entering early 2023, more than a year had passed since Eric Richins' death. To the public, Kouri was known as a single mother trying to raise 3 sons after her family's heartbreaking tragedy. On 7th March 2023, Kouri released a children's book titled, "Are You With Me?" The book tells the story of a boy who believes his late father is still watching over and protecting him from heaven. Kouri said she wrote the book to help her children cope with the pain of losing their father. After the book's release, Kouri began appearing on local television and radio programs across Utah. In interviews, she spoke about the hardships her family had gone through since Eric's death. She spoke of the pain, of the loss, and of her 3 children's healing journey. Many viewers were moved by her story. Many saw Kouri as the image of a strong mother trying to overcome the greatest tragedy of her life. But what the public didn't know was that throughout that entire time, the investigation into Eric Richins' death had never stopped. Investigators continued reviewing phone data, continued gathering financial records, continued cross-checking statements and evidence. And the deeper they went into the case, the more they came to believe Eric Richins' death may not have been an accident or a case of natural illness. By this point, investigators believed they had enough grounds to take the next steps in the investigation. After more than a year of investigation, investigators had gathered an increasing amount of evidence relating to Eric Richins' death. One of the most important sources of evidence came from Kouri Richins' phone and electronic devices. While reviewing her search history, investigators found a number of entries that particularly caught their attention, including searches relating to a lethal dose of fentanyl, other searches relating to how a poisoning case would be recorded on a death certificate, and searches relating to prisons for wealthy people in America. For investigators, this data didn't automatically prove a crime had occurred, but when linked with the data they had already gathered, it began forming an entirely different picture. At the same time, investigators also focused on the source of the fentanyl. During the investigation, they found a notable name connected to the source of the fentanyl in Eric's system, a woman named Carmen Lauber, someone who had previously worked for the Richins family. According to testimony later presented in court, Carmen Lauber said she had sold fentanyl to Kouri Richins on multiple occasions. This was a particularly important statement because if true, it would create a direct link between Kouri and the substance found in Eric's system. Investigators continued cross-checking the statement and cross-referencing it against the evidence gathered throughout the investigation. And the more they cross-checked, the more the pieces began to fit together. By this point, investigators believed they had enough grounds to move the case into an entirely new phase. The phase of taking formal legal action against the primary suspect in the case. After more than a year of gathering evidence, cross-checking statements, and analyzing data, investigators believed they had sufficient grounds to take legal action against Kouri Richins. The forensic findings, the phone data, the Richins family's financial records, the life insurance policies signed shortly before the death, and the statements relating to the source of the fentanyl. All the evidence had been compiled into a substantial investigation file. 8 May 2023. While the public still knew Kouri as a single mother who had just published a book about the pain of losing her husband, investigators in Utah took the decisive step to bring the investigation to a close. Kouri Richins was arrested and charged in connection with Eric Richins' death. This news quickly shocked the public, because just days earlier, she had still been appearing on television speaking about her love for her late husband. And now, she herself had become the central suspect in the investigation into that man's death. In the charging documents, the prosecution alleged Eric Richins died as a result of fentanyl poisoning. At the same time, They alleged Kouri was connected to the incident. Kouri denied all the charges and maintained her innocence, and said she needed a defense lawyer to represent her in every step of the process. But from the moment of her arrest, the case was no longer a secret investigation. It officially entered the stage of public legal proceedings, and that was when all the evidence investigators had quietly gathered over more than a year began coming to light. After being arrested on 8 May 2023, Kouri Richins entered Utah's criminal justice system. At this point, the investigation had ended, but the legal battle had only just begun. Prosecutors laid out, one by one, the charges they believed Kouri was responsible for, the most serious of which related to Eric Richins' death. In addition, prosecutors also alleged the case did not begin only on the night Eric died in March 2022. They also alleged Kouri was connected to the first incident, which occurred on Valentine's Day 2022. The incident in which Eric lost consciousness after eating a sandwich she had prepared. According to the prosecution, that was not a random medical incident, but part of a chain of events they believed had taken place before Eric's death. Alongside this, Kouri also faced charges relating to insurance and financial documents. She denied all of these charges. Through her defense team, Kouri maintained her innocence and insisted she had not harmed her husband. The defense argued the investigation contained many points that had not been proven with certainty. They also questioned the reliability of certain key witnesses, particularly those said to be connected to the source of the fentanyl. Meanwhile, the prosecution maintained the evidence they had gathered all pointed in the same direction, and they believed they could prove that before a jury. At this point, both sides began preparing for a trial, expected to draw the attention of the entire country. A trial in which every piece of evidence, every statement, and every secret accumulated over years would be laid before the jury, one by one. Early 2026, after months of preparing the case file and legal proceedings, the trial of Kouri Richins formally opened at the 3rd District Court in Park City, Utah. There, prosecutors began presenting all the evidence they had gathered over an investigation spanning more than 3 years since Eric Richins' death. Meanwhile, Kouri's defense team also prepared to challenge each charge before the jury. This quickly became one of the most closely watched trials in the United States, because the accused was not a career criminal, nor a stranger to the public, nor someone with any grudge or conflict with the victim, but the woman who had once appeared on television, speaking about the pain of losing her husband and promoting a children's book called Are You With Me? From the very first days of the trial, the prosecution laid out what they believed was the motive behind Eric Richins' death. According to prosecutors, Kouri was carrying debts of around $4.5 million US before Eric was found dead. At the same time, she believed that after Eric's death, she would benefit from life insurance policies and assets worth more than $4 million US. The prosecution also presented messages to the jury, said to be between Kouri and Robert Josh Grossman, the man she had previously been romantically involved with. Messages in which they claimed Kouri had spoken about leaving her current marriage and starting a new life. However, the defense pushed back against that interpretation. They argued prosecutors were trying to turn the difficulties in her marriage and finances into evidence of guilt. Meanwhile, Kouri continued to deny all the charges and maintained she had nothing to do with her husband's death. But this was only the opening of the trial, because the prosecution's most important evidence had yet to be presented. As the trial continued, the prosecution began presenting evidence they believed reflected Kouri Richins' thoughts and intentions before Eric's death. A digital forensics expert was called to testify before the jury. His task was to present data extracted from Kouri Richins' phone. According to data revealed at trial, investigators had found a number of notable search entries, including the phrase, "What is a lethal dose of fentanyl?" There were also other searches relating to death certificates, relating to how a poisoning case would be recorded following death, and searches relating to prisons for wealthy people in America. For the prosecution, this was extremely important data, because they argued these searches wouldn't appear randomly unless someone had prepared for them in advance. and they reflected Kouri's interest in matters directly relating to the cause of Eric's death. However, the defense disagreed with that interpretation. They argued that searching for information online doesn't mean someone has committed a crime, and that content found on a phone cannot on its own prove who the offender is. The debate between the two sides quickly grew tense, because at this point, the jury wasn't just hearing about debts, not just hearing about insurance. They were now also being shown data taken directly from Kouri Richins' own phone, and that was only part of the evidence the prosecution was preparing to present in court. After presenting the phone data, the prosecution went on to call the witness they considered the most important link in the entire case. That witness was Carmen Lauber, someone who had previously worked for the Richins family. Before the jury, Carmen testified that Kouri Richins had tried multiple times to buy fentanyl from her. According to Carmen's testimony, in one exchange, Kouri had asked about what she called Michael Jackson stuff. The prosecution argued this was a way of referring to a substance capable of causing death. Carmen went on to testify she had sold fentanyl to Kouri on several separate occasions. For the prosecution, this testimony was a very important piece because it created a direct link between Kouri Richins and the source of the fentanyl found in Eric's system. However, the defense immediately pushed back. They pointed out Carmen had given differing accounts at various points during the investigation. They also emphasized Carmen had been granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for cooperating with investigators. According to the defense, that meant this witness's reliability needed to be considered carefully. But whether or not one believed Carmen's testimony, the jury had now heard a story entirely different from what Kouri had said after her husband's death. And that was not yet the final piece of evidence the prosecution was preparing to present to the court. As the trial entered its final stage, the prosecution continued presenting further evidence they believed would complete the full picture of the case. Among it was a letter found in Kouri Richins' cell. According to the prosecution, the letter's contents appeared to instruct a loved one to tell a story that Eric Richins had regularly used fentanyl and regularly used drugs. Prosecutors argued this was an attempt to create an alternative explanation for Eric's death. Meanwhile, the defense maintained the letter was purely fictional and did not prove any criminal act. After weeks of hearing testimony, reviewing evidence, and listening to arguments from both sides, the jury was given the task of reaching a final decision, 16 March 2026. The jury returned to the courtroom at the 3rd District Court in Park City. Kouri Richins sat in silence as the verdicts were read out one by one. The jury found Kouri Richins guilty of aggravated murder in connection with Eric Richins' death and guilty of the charge of intentional poisoning relating to the incident on Valentine's Day 2022, guilty of forgery charges, and guilty of fraud charges relating to insurance benefits. The years-long criminal trial had finally reached a conclusion, but one final step remained: deciding the sentence Kouri Richins would face for what the jury had just determined had occurred. 13 May 2026, the very day Eric Richins would have turned 44. All parties were once again present at the 3rd District Court in Park City, Utah, to hear the judge's final decision. At this point, Kouri Richins had been found guilty on a series of serious charges, including aggravated murder in Eric Richins' death, conspiracy to poison Eric in the incident on Valentine's Day 2022, forgery, and fraud relating to insurance benefits. Before sentencing, the court heard statements from the victim's family, in particular, letters written by Eric's sons. According to documents submitted to the court, the children said they felt afraid at the thought their mother could one day be released. They said their father had been taken from their lives permanently, and those losses would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, Kouri Richins continued to maintain her innocence. She called the jury's verdict a complete lie and pleaded with her children not to give up on her. After reviewing the entire case file, the evidence presented at trial, and the impact of the case on the victim's family, Justice Richard Mrazek delivered his final decision. Kouri Richins was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. That meant she would spend the rest of her life in prison. In handing down the sentence, the judge found that someone who committed acts such as these was too dangerous to be allowed back into society. For Eric Richins' family, this marked the end of a legal battle spanning more than 4 years since his death. But the wounds this case leaves behind will remain long after the trial has ended. The sentence of life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole, brought to a close one of the most sensational cases in the state of Utah in recent years. For Eric Richins' family, this was the moment they believed justice had finally been served after years of waiting. However, no sentence can ever bring Eric back to his loved ones, nor can it make up for the losses his 3 children will carry for the rest of their lives. The Kouri Richins case also quickly drew public attention across the United States. Many were shocked that the woman who had once appeared on television as a grieving widow, a mother who wrote a book about loss and healing, had been convicted over her own husband's death. This case is a reminder that what we see on the surface doesn't always reflect the full truth behind it. At the same time, it highlights the important role of forensic science, digital investigation, and the persistence of investigators in uncovering cases that once appeared to show no sign of a crime at all.